Hello and welcome to Plus One to Gaming. I'm Chris.
I'm Billy.
And I'm Mark.
And today we are going to explore how long is a turn in D&D. Now, there is some hard guidance on this, how long a turn really is. But because you go into this weird bullet time when combat begins, there are some blurred lines. There's all you get into this what I like to call Dragon Ball Z syndrome, where it's you spend half an hour, but really, in real time, 6 seconds has gone by.
Only Krillin's died. That's the only thing that's happened the whole episode.
Yeah, and that kind of just drags out forever. And every arc, Billy doesn't watch Dragon Ball Z.
I don't watch Dragon Ball Z.
Well, Mark, we'll have to share.
Krillin dies 8 times. He's the sacrificial, emotional. No, not again.
He's the monk with the dots on his forehead. Yeah. I am familiar with it. I tried to watch it 5 times, and I would never get through I don't know.
I feel like if you didn't start when you were 10, it's not that thick. I've tried to go back and rewatch it as a fan, and I'm just ooh.
It doesn't stand very well. It also came out in the late 80s, early 90s. It's old.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, I don't have that that history with it to be able to push past. I think the farthest I got was the Goku was in a spaceship, and that was not very. I don't think that's very far, but nothing happened, and I just kept pushing through. Nothing happened. And I'm Jesus Christ, I'm done. I have other things I can do. I just can't watch him do push-ups in a circular, it's like a ball spaceship too. It's not even looks like a spaceship. It's just a big ball. And he's I gotta do more push-ups. Look, I'm putting more weights on my foot, and I'm cool. I guess
that's gonna make me fight better. Yeah,
could have
instead of a whole season.
Yeah,
it was. But all right, so Dragon Ball Z rants aside. The common trope in there is they spend a ton of time talking, and it's it just drags on and on and on. And that's kind of like combat in D&D. So with limited things you can do in this you get into initiative, and it's a turn-based system like an RPG. Because it has a root in tactical war games, there's a finite amount you can do with each of your actions. We put it into a turn-based to kind of organize the information and make it fair. So I wanted to have this conversation around the stuff you can do in combat and kind of just formulate our suggestions and guidelines or guidance around that. How does that sound for you guys?
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds great.
So let's just talk about action economy in general. You've been playing D&D and role-playing games the longest among us. Do you want to give your hot take on what action economy is?
I mean, yeah. So we can end this episode early. 1 turn is 6 seconds.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. But yeah, action economy is the idea that you want to make sure that you are doing as many things as you can in your turn, in that you get different, a move action, an action, you get a bonus action, making sure that you're maximizing the amount of things that you can do in that 1 6-second block that is given to your character, because everything is kind of going on at once. But yeah, you have a finite set of moves that you can do. Well, it's D&D, so you can do whatever you want. It's unlimited. You can do anything, but you have a finite amount of blocks of what you can fill your turn. So think about it you have every round, you have your action, your move, a bonus action, and a reaction. A lot of times, a reaction won't get filled. Many times, a bonus action, you won't do anything. But action economy is trying to do at least something in each of those blocks so that you're not wasting an opportunity to just progress the story and progress the combat.
Quick, I want to visit something. Is a bonus act, if you use your bonus action to cast a spell and then later try to use a reaction, are you still able to do both? Is it an extra action in addition to a bonus action?
No, the bonus action is a reaction, but
right.
It's a bonus action that you're doing not on your turn. Sorry, I should be more clear.
Well, it's the only reason that's important is if let's say you're a cleric, and you use healing word to heal during your turn. If you tried to use something as a reaction still in the same round but not in your turn, you wouldn't be able to use your reaction because if you've already used a bonus action slot, essentially, right?
Yes. So a lot of things. So a reaction isn't always your bonus action, but a lot of things use your bonus action as your reaction.
Yeah.
But it is like there are some things that just say on your like you get one reaction per turn. So you can cast something in your that uses a bonus action, but a lot of times it'll say specifically like this has to be used in your reaction.
Reactions are technically a separate category
thing.
From bonus actions.
So like but you can't cast, like there's a limit on how many. It's more like when you're talking with spells, it's a limit on how many spells you can cast. So like,
well, spell would have reaction, right? If it were able to, like shield.
Yeah, but then so you would cast it as a reaction. But so it's like you don't want to think of it as like you don't want to not do your bonus action because then you wouldn't be able to do your reaction. But like when you're talking about like spells, it's weird because like you can't cast like a damaging spell that you cast as a bonus action. You can't also cast a regular spell. Like there's a limit on how many spells you can cast.
Right. So you could do like a bonus action spell and maybe a cantrip as an action.
Yes, but you can't cast 2 leveled spells.
Correct.
In one turn. So that's more than, I guess that's spell economy more than it is action economy. But yeah, like
most spells in action, it rolls up into it.
So technically, the reaction is a spot that you get one of them around, but you can use that with, like I said, it's kind of like a weird thing that you can. Like if you take I don't want to say the wrong word because but like if you ready an action, that action occurs as a reaction. So you can't ready an action using your reaction and then also take a reaction to do something else. Like that's your reaction, but it's using your action slot, if that makes sense. Like it is.
You kind of give up your action slot to hold it as a reaction later. And then, like you said too, Bill, you only get one reaction per round. So like if you do that and then for some chance an enemy would have provoked an opportunity of attack by leaving your space, you wouldn't be able to take it because you've already used a reaction that turn, or rather that round, to do that. So like that's also something that can be easily missed of like how many reactions you get. Because you take your turn on the first turn and then a monster goes on the fifth and it leaves, you could forget that you've already used a reaction. But it's just one of those other things you have to pay attention to.
Is that because for spell casting you have to account for concentration and things like that? No.
So it would be like, let's say that your first,
so let me give you a scenario real quick.
Go ahead.
Umrin is, in a battle and readies a dodge and then is knocked off of a cliff by a push. He has available to him a slow fall reaction. But since he's used his action to hold and ready instead of any other action.
Kind of, that's a weird one. So first of all, like dodge is an action, so you don't have to use your reaction to do dodge. Dodge just makes you harder to hit that round.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use. Yeah, you wouldn't hold it. But like, let's say you wanted to,
or if I hold anything.
Yeah. So let's just say you wanted to. You're holding an action to punch this guy when he comes through the door. But another guy, pushes you off a cliff, and then you have that reaction for slow fall. If you haven't. Like just because you've called that you're going to use your reaction to hold this action, you haven't actually taken that reaction yet. Like it is prepped that you could, but if you do the slow fall, you can take your reaction to do slow fall. You just wouldn't be able to use the reaction again. But yeah, I'll have to look at specifically the language of slow fall because it seems like it would be a bad idea if you already took your reaction and then.
Use your reaction to reduce falling damage by 25.
Yeah. So
So I think my question is like,
It's tough.
it gets really tough. But
Yeah.
the one thing we didn't do was go over just the basics. But like
Yes.
actions in combat, page
Yes.
192 in the
Yep.
player's handbook for anybody.
Let's go over
Mhm.
those because there's a
You've got
lot you can do.
attack,
Yeah.
cast a spell,
Yes.
dash, disengage, dodge, help, hide, ready, search, use an object.
We could potentially add sprint in there depending on the rule set you're using. Some have like a sprint mechanic, but that is all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, sprint and could be like, can maybe bundle that in with dash and
Mhm.
the movement stuff. So I feel like it gets tricky, especially when you're talking about how long things take, and with reactions, especially in your 6 second turn, and then the fact that you can technically what feels like shift time and space by being like, I'm going to ready, but in the mechanics of the game, you're going to come up later in the turn order. You know what I mean? But it gets very murky.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about this stuff because like there's such an overwhelming selection of things you can do, and you're also dealing with all the stuff happening simultaneously, more or less, and it's adversarial. There's another party trying to harm you. So let's go through this list. And aside from these main actions you can take, there's also tertiary and support actions you can take, and those are simple things like move your body. That's one of the best tactical advices you can get in D&D or in just life. If there's danger here and you move away from it, that's action economy.
Yeah.
And in D&D, you get bonuses to your armor class depending on how you use stuff like that. So it's good to like know what's available to you. So
and they don't call out something like cover either,
Right.
which is something you can do, but that maybe that is more movement, because you need to, if you're moving more often than not, you're moving to cover.
And cover
in
is
most
huge,
situations.
especially
and that's very huge, I think, because I realized I've never really used it much.
Yeah, I haven't either. Like until I started playing Solasta, video game, did I actually really start paying attention to cover. But let's go through this list. So we'll start with the attack action. This is probably one of the most basic things most players are going to do in the game, and it's as simple as just rolling your d20, adding your ability modifier, your proficiency modifier, and then if there's any item bonuses to that, you would add those. What else? Some classes get extra attacks. That might be worth kind of talking. Yeah, Mark?
So
Many extra attacks.
His extra attack is using a bonus action for an a monk can always use a bonus action to make a strike with, I believe, a martial weapon, your fists, or like a marshaled weapon, right? I have to look at the thing, but like
so any attack grants me an extra unarmed strike.
Unarmed strike.
And then using key, of course, monks can turn hits into multiple attacks in certain situations with like flurry of blows.
So let's talk about that, because that's where like you first start to see some great action economy for the monk, at least. So you make your attack, right? You roll your d20, you roll all that stuff with a quarterstaff, right? And if that hits, you get to make another extra attack with not expending any additional resources, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
That's an extra d4 plus your... Does that attack get any modifiers to it? That unarmed attack?
The unarmed attack, no, but it scales with
it scales with monk level
class. You get better unarmed attacks.
And they become magical too at a certain point. Your fists become just magic with magical key energy. And then after you've made those two strikes, you can then start expending key points to then pump even more into that. Right?
Yeah. And start altering between key towards extra damage, healing in the case of Way of the Open Hand, which is what we're reskinning from.
Do you have Stunning Strike too?
Hells yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So like within just one attack, you've got quite a bit of action economy just in terms of the attack, but then adding status effects with that for some additional resources is really cool.
Yeah, there's so much available actually that it's hella intimidating. And I've started, even I think you guys can probably see it, it's on my character sheet in Roll20. I've just started writing out how to manage the action economy. Like I've literally had to sit down and be like, I'd really, if I were a very good like data analyst and or a designer, I would make a literal flow chart for myself. That's like I would click on something and be like, if this hits, these are now available.
Mhm.
But I mean,
sorry, you just get the feel of that, right?
Yeah.
Like after over time.
I think it's kind of fun too.
Exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, like in life, you're presented with unanticipated challenges, and you just have to sometimes use the skills that you have right then and there to try and figure it out. And sometimes it's the same thing. Like you've got this character and you've got your skills and abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that gets, I think, really complicated is just trying to manage it with the rules, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can also start throwing key points into Step of the Wind, and then all of a sudden you have disengage, dash open to you again. Patient defense brings in another key point to get a dodge action. So he's level 5. So with 5 key points, it's like he can do so much.
A lot of different options, but that's the key is you have to remember that you have to choose between them, because I think when we're talking about actions, we also can talk about like common pitfalls that people fall into. And number one is you only get one bonus action. And with that, you're like using a disengage as a bonus action. That is also the same bonus action you would use to do that unarmed strike. So you can't hit them unarmed strike for the extra attack and then use a key point to deuce out of there with disengage, because that like the spell or the ability is, you know, you use you can take the disengage, the hide, or the dash action as a bonus action, which is really nice and useful, but that uses your bonus action. Especially when we're level 5. Luckily, none of our characters have extra attacks, I don't think yet, where you can attack twice. But if you had like a lot of people that have two, they dual wield, they have 2 weapons. Your offhand weapon and attack is a bonus action. So even if you get 2 attacks, you can only hit with that offhand weapon once. You can't attack right, left, right, left. It's right, left, use your bonus action, and then you can attack twice, which is your main weapon again. So that's a very common one I see, and it's very easy to fall into, to think like, oh, well, I get 2 attacks and I can attack both times with my weapon.
And you can also choose, like if you do that extra attack, you can choose to hold your bonus action to save it. Like maybe you want to use it later for, you know, another opportunity in that round of combat. It becomes really, it's tough. You have to figure out where to spend your points and your resources, and sometimes you'll spend them well, and sometimes you should have spent them more. That's just part of the game, I think.
Yeah, that's why I feel that dual wielding is like your offhand weapon is extremely, like, people love it because it looks cool. It's just like the 2 like dual wielding lightsabers, but everybody wants to do it, but it's actually not that useful, especially when you get in higher levels, because that bonus action is I think the most valuable thing, because there's so many different options you can do with that bonus action. That
defense,
when you have
opportunity attacks.
Yeah, when you have that offhand weapon, like you feel like, well, I got to use that bonus action for that offhand weapon every single time. And so, especially the offhand weapon in general is a weaker weapon. I mean, if you get the feat, you can add some bonuses to it, so it's similar to your main hand, but most of the time it's not as good. So it's just, I don't know. That is a very easy hole for people to fall into that don't understand action economy, to immediately say, "Oh, I'm Drizzt and I have 2 sweet scimitars." Like, you'd probably be better off with just one, buddy.
Yeah.
Like in the game.
Unless you like really pump your play style and your feats and attributes into that, like, and your character's just built around that.
Yes.
Cool. But like, you're absolutely right. It's not the most efficient action use economy when the bonus action can be applied in so many more beneficial ways. All right.
Correct. And it shouldn't just be like, I think it shouldn't be your default. Like, why would I not have 2 weapons? You know, if I have one weapon and I'm not going to use a shield, why not just use another weapon? And you're like, yeah, you could hold it in there, but don't feel obligated to use that bonus action every single time. Like, I'm with you, but like, don't feel like you have to. Like, oh, why would anybody just have a sword and an empty hand? Because you'll find out.
I can hold shit in my mouth too. Part of my mouth. Put a pen in there. Sword. All right. Well, is there anything else we want to cover with attacking? Because I think that's, in terms of action economy for attacks, that's pretty robust.
I do want to ask Bill a question.
Yeah.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the difference between a typical bonus action and what I'll be working with on a monk is key. Because there are times when rather than using the bonus action, I can use the key as the payment or whatever, you know what I mean? The resource that I'm using to get that. So like, for example, Step of the Wind, because it's going to be really important to me, so I need to get it right, is Step of the Wind is spend 1 key to take the disengage or dash action.
As a bonus action. That is a very important part.
I don't think you're right on that, though. I feel like that breaks.
It does say as a bonus action.
It absolutely does. I'm not lying to you.
Step of the Wind.
Step of the Wind.
You can spend one key. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. You can spend 1 key point to take the disengage or dash action as a bonus action on your turn, and your jump distance is doubled for the turn. So yes, all of those things.
Wait, read it again.
Sorry, I scrolled past it. Step of the Wind. You can take 1 key point to take the disengage or dash action as a bonus action on your turn, and your jump distance is doubled for the turn. That is Step of the Wind.
Not what it says on my sheet. I have it wrong. That's why.
Okay. Yeah. The rules is written. It's like an extra. You spend that resource to get an extra benefit. But you can only do like you have to choose between Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, or Step of the Wind. So you got like offense, defense, and mobility as like 3 options you can choose one of to do in a turn.
But they all take your bonus action, so you have to choose one. And so like with Flurry of Blows, you can take 2 unarmed strikes. Normally you can just take 1. So Flurry of Blows is just an extra, using a key to take an extra unarmed strike. So
you get 2 extra unarmed strikes.
2 extra, yes. Normally you'd always get 1 for free as a monk. Whenever you take an action or an attack as your action, or an attack action, you can use your bonus action as a monk to make an unarmed strike. With Flurry of Blows, you spend a key. That 1 unarmed strike turns into 2, so you can take. Your attack action and then 2 bam bam knee
elbow knee
tiger knee. Yes, and so so that's what I'm talking about. That bonus action becomes very, very useful, and that's a limiting factor. Yeah, I mean exactly. Like it's easy to think that like I'm already spending this key point, so that's the currency that I'm spending. But it allows you just to do more with your bonus action. Very rarely do you spend a resource and get like a free move. Like I think the warrior fighters, like their
action surge
is literally you use it and you get an extra action. But
but that's action. It, and that's it for until you take a rest.
So then, why is like? I mean, I guess we don't need to know the answer to this. That just confuses me as why maybe they all are bonus actions.
Yes.
Like Hands of Harm. I'm thinking anything that uses ki is a bonus action.
No. So Hands of Harm is you already are hitting an unarmed strike, so you can spend 1 key point to deal extra necrotic damage. And so, like, you don't have to, like, if you were doing that unarmed strike, you use a bonus action for it just because the monk uses a bonus action to do an unarmed strike. I guess if you didn't have a monk weapon, because and you always use unarmed strikes, then you could always use Hand of Harm. But it specifically has to be with an unarmed strike.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you get that one unarmed strike as a bonus action when you make the attack action, and then you can use that key point to do more damage to that. Like you put some necrotic power into your punch or your knee.
So could he do this? Because he's a fifth level monk right now. He's got an attack and a bonus action. He's got an extra attack, and he's got ki. So with his first attack and bonus action, he could use something like Stunning Strike or like a non-bonus action ki to power that up, right?
Stunning Strike's passive.
Stunning Strike's passive? Let's see.
Well, according to what I wrote down, but
I believe
we should probably
starting
check.
at 5th level, you can interfere with the flow of ki. When you hit another creature with a melee weapon, you can spend 1 key point to attempt a Stunning Strike, which it must succeed a con throw or be stunned. So that's not bonus action invoked. It's just putting ki into your thing.
Yeah.
And then on that second attack, that does not have a bonus action, he could not use something like Flurry of Blows because he didn't proc the unarmed strike with his bonus action.
Correct. But that's...
But if
in theory... Yeah, I was just saying, like, they don't have to be mutually exclusive unless they are both take the same action. So in theory, you could use your bonus action to take spend a key point to take Flurry of Blows, get 2 unarmed strikes, and then spend another key point for one of those unarmed strikes to be Hands of Harm. And then so you do 1 unarmed strike and then another unarmed strike with extra necrotic damage. But that would, I mean, that round where you would cost 2 key. And so you can always take, unless like you have to duplicate either the bonus action or something like that, you can double up. So like it does give you those abilities. So you could take
you could pair Flurry of Blows with something like Stunning Strike and Hands of Harm and use 3 points in a single turn to do some like crazy shit.
Yeah,
basically.
you can always, exactly. So you could, so with your, like if you want, like even though you are holding a monk weapon, like if you wanted to attack that round with your fist just because you wanted to use Hands of Harm, you could attack with the fist with as your normal attack action, use Hands of Harm, and then use the key to deuce out of there. Like there's so many different combinations, and as long as it's not explicitly forbidden, you can do it. And if you want to do it and it makes sense, and you think that like, oh, this could be iffy, you can always just ask like, oh, I'm trying to do this. Is that allowed? And in general, as long as it's not like, as long as you're not doubling up an action, of course. Yeah, I think it's always fun.
Yeah, looks like I made a classic mistake of copying some stuff from the internet rather than the player's handbook.
You mean everything on the internet's not true?
Transcribing it wrong.
That's all right. That's why we have
that's
a group. It does say specifically
it's
though.
Confusing.
Yeah,
but
it
now
is
that
confusing.
makes more sense because.
But it does say
without seeing the martial art extra unarmed strike as a bonus action, which I didn't have written down, that literally changes everything. Yeah. So that clears it up.
For a monk class too, which I would consider more of an advanced class, just like it takes time, but you really have to like study up to understand like what the action economy is behind it and making sure that you're not screwing yourself over.
Yeah.
Not to like scare you off, because monk is a really cool class.
No, and I saw there's a couple, decent people out there on YouTube that have some pretty detailed like breakdowns of even like moves that they've done in game and stuff with monks. So it's definitely something that's easy to study up on.
It is like what I would do is if you wanted to have like a little cheat sheet off to the side, it would just show you all the options you can do as your main action, your action.
Yeah,
just
that's
all the
what I
options
was
you have
trying
your
to
bonus
do.
actions, and then all the actions you have as like your reaction, so that like if something happens, you can think, okay, it's like, oh, I want to use my bonus action. Like here are the options I have. Disengage, all that other stuff, and then maybe like highlight the ones that take key, so okay, these are the ones that I get for free. These are the ones I need to pay a resource for.
Yeah, it's actually now that will be easier because I had 3 categories, but now I realize some of them were just bonus actions, so I can narrow down that list and make it a little clearer to myself.
Nice. So attacking is quite robust, as we've established. Yeah. Let's move down the list. The next one is, I think, just as equally confusing, and it's casting spells. So casting spells is also something that has limitations and a lot of nuance. You have spells that take an action. You have spells that take longer than an action. You have spells that take a reaction. So and there are some spells that have concentration. So you have to hold on to your mental focus. And if you let that lapse, that effect ends to be able to cast another spell. So there's a ton of things to consider with spell casting that I think is really important to highlight as another part of like action economy. Because if you let your burning sphere lapse to cast something else, you're changing the flow of battle in a certain way, and it's like you need to know that those things will happen when you shift gears and change different spells. So Bill, do you have any thoughts on spell casting in terms of action economy?
Most spells are just your action. So those aren't that hard. It's the ones you get that are bonus actions or reactions that make it a little bit hard. But usually those are just like quick things that you can do. Like if you're a druid, cast Shillelagh. That's a bonus action. Things like that you can just kind of like snap and do, kind of is what I think of them being. But yeah, it's a lot of people don't realize about like the concentration and how that works with casting a spell. So I'll just go over the rules just as a refresher for everybody. So spells that have concentration require concentration. So that means that you can hold on to them for as long as it says. Usually it's like a minute, sometimes a little longer. But the entire time, a small part of your brain has to be concentrating on those. So if you get attacked, there's a chance that you could lose that concentration because you have to roll a check. And it's pretty easy. It's just like the damage or 10. I forget. I have to double up the rule. But in general, it's not that hard for smaller spells to hold on that concentration. But that also means you can only be casting one concentration spell at a time. But if you cast like that fire, what's the one that keeps a fire and you can keep moving it into it? I forget off the top of my head.
Burning Sphere.
Burning Sphere, the one you just said. You can cast a bunch of spells that are not concentration while you have that Burning Sphere active, because you can cast any non-concentration spell while you have a concentration spell active, and it does not affect you at all. So while you have that Burning Sphere chasing around the bad guys and constantly ramming into them, you can be casting lightning bolt or a cantrip or whatever, anything else. And a lot of people think that, I have this Burning Sphere, that's my, I don't want to cast something else because I'll lose it. As long as there's not another concentration spell, you won't. But it's hard to keep track of all those things when you're going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And so,
as I was building spell books, when I start playing spellcasting classes, I have to kind of look at my spread of concentration versus instant, because if all of your spells are concentration, that means really you can only hold one thing during your combat. And if you have a spell like haste, for example, which is an incredible spell, if you lose your concentration on it or let it lapse prematurely, that could actually, it basically gives you exhaustion as a negative effect, or the person that it's been cast on. And that can, really negatively affect your performance. Mm-hmm. So it definitely requires paying attention to. And then of course you don't want to cast a spell that requires 10 turns because you're going to get picked off before you ever get a chance to cast it.
Yeah. A 10-minute spell. Yeah.
Or a spell you think is concentration that, I've seen in some live plays, like party members trying to buff people. And then it's like, oh, now I'm a cow for how many hours?
Yeah.
Like that was not a good stealth technique.
Yeah, because ones that you can't, because if it doesn't say that you can dispel it with an action or a bonus action or whatever, you can't dispel it. So there's a lot of spells that you do, and they're until they run out, or you have to cast some sort of countering spell.
But am I right? Am I right that if it's a concentration, you can always drop it willingly?
Yes.
Yeah, you can always lapse your concentration.
Oh, if you want to, you can always just choose to not concentrate.
Does that work if you're mind controlled? Like if a mind flayer has me, can I still do? I don't have control of my own concentration, do I?
No, you have to. We should do a whole episode.
There's very often, so
no, we should do a whole episode on mind control because it's really fun, but it requires the character to be in on it, or else like it can be very
fair.
Yeah, like you could always like purposely nerf the like some sort of mind altering spell that wants you to do something. You could just be like, well, my character is going to do this. Like it's within the realms of what it wants to do, but I'm purposely choosing the least bad alternative, or I'm trying to like, it's like, oh, my weakness is I'm too detail oriented. It's one of those kind of like, it's a bullshit thing. It's a cop out. And so I would have fun if my character was mind controlled, because then like if you're mind controlled, you have as much vigor and as much determination as you normally have. It's misdirected now, and so you're not going to purposefully like nerf your actions so you don't harm your people. Like, and
we had a brief flirtation with this in the game you ran, Bill, where there was a Crown of Madness spell on Soans, and I thought it was really cool the way it played out. Like it made sense and it fit, and Eric role played it beautifully, but and added some cool texture to it. But like, yeah, that was a great example of how you can kind of like, okay, you don't have agency of your character, but you still do in like a different way, and that's just a fun new experience.
Yeah, so like certain ones of those, like where you have agency but you can't control one aspect, like your mind is aware that I'm going to attack you if you get close to me. Don't get close to me. Like, is that it doesn't say that you're mind controlled. It just means that you are forced to attack the nearest creature. I think that's what the spell is. So like you're perfectly aware that you are killing your comrades, but you just cannot help it. So that's like one where it's like you can work, kind of play that up to like, don't come close to me. Like I'll hit you. I don't want to, but I gotta.
Because of rules.
Because of rules.
Magical
like,
rules.
like exactly. So like I would say like if a guy's like, I'm using my free action to tell everybody to stay away from me. I'm like, that's well within what you guys would do. Like all of a sudden you like, it's like Idle Hands, that movie with Devon Sawa.
That's was exactly good.
Like, oh, fucking.
Whatever happened to Devon Sawa?
I don't know. My sister
had a huge crush on him.
She had a huge crush on him. Of course, everybody's sister in the 90s had their
Devon Sawa, Leonardo DiCaprio,
JTT. Oh yeah, her walls were covered with those like the posters from Teen Beat magazine.
Wasn't Pauly Shore in Idle Hands too?
I think so. Yeah, it was like him and Jessica Alba. I think like her like when she was a teenager.
Oh
I don't know. It just always makes me think of that because it's like a really good of like before he cut off his own hand, like he couldn't control it. I think that's funny.
No, it wasn't Pauly Shore. It was Seth Green.
Seth Green. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Back when he was. I mean, he's still funny. I'm not a Seth Green hater.
I don't hate on Seth Green. He brought us Rooster Teeth. Not Rooster Teeth.
Yeah. Robot Chicken.
Yeah. Rooster Teeth is Death Battles. But yes. Okay, so anything else with casting a spell? We had a spell of distraction cast upon us.
Sorry. No, I would.
Same rules apply. Like you can only get an action, a bonus action. Your spells are going to dictate what category they fall into. Watch your concentration, and if you hold you can one thing I do want to make sure we talk about is you can hold your action to cast a spell. And that's the same, like, again, the same rules apply. You're holding that action. In that case, though, if you hold your action to cast a spell, does that spell then become a reaction?
Yes, because your turn is a reaction. So whenever you hold your, well, we'll get in that because hold action is one of those. But
Yeah.
Anything that you want to hold your action becomes a reaction because your entire turn basically becomes that reaction.
Right, because you're waiting for something and then reacting to it when it happens.
Yes,
that's the nature of the move. Cool.
Correct.
All right, let's move on to dash because this one's a simple one. Dashing is a mobility tactic, and you take the dash action. You're basically giving up your action to double your movement speed. And if there are parameters on there like difficult terrain or some kind of immobilizing type of spell that like halves your speed or slows you down, like you have to apply those as well to the calculation. But essentially, you're enabling mobility by sacrificing your action. Is there anything else to add there, Bill?
No, I would say just with movement in 5e, it is you can split it however you want as long as you move on your turn.
And what do you mean by that?
So that means that you can move 20 feet, make an attack, and then move 20 more feet if your movement is 40. So if you take that dash action, it just doubles your movement speed, basically. So let's say you wanted to move 30 feet, do an action, move 10 more feet. If you have one that allows you to do a bonus action that's separate, you could do that and then move, or a free action or something, and then move 30 more feet. So let's say you run over, attack a guy, run over, open a door, which is kind of,
Use an object.
Use an object or something like that.
Interact with an object.
Yeah. There are some things that if you look at the movement, all the things you can do as interact with objects around you that you can do as part of a move action.
Yeah. I do want to talk about that when we get to it, because I think that's also really important of like where you draw the line of like what you can and can't do that's not covered by like attacking that other shit. I think but basically, unless you have like a monk ability like Step of the Wind or a rogue ability like Cutting Action, you cannot attack and dash in the same turn. Like unless there's some kind of ability with your class that allows you to, you cannot dash and attack in the same turn.
Correct. Yeah, because they both take the standard action. So I was giving an example of a monk doing that, but it's just you can split up your movement. Mm-hmm. So when you take the dash, if you needed to do something else, it just doubles your movement speed, but you can still split it up between free actions or bonus actions or whatever else you have.
So that makes sense as to why Step of the Wind would be a bonus action, I think, in the action economy, because the benefit there is that you're getting dash and disengage and still having the ability to attack when normally those are mutually exclusive.
Correct.
That's why
that's a big deal.
Same thing with like rogues and their cunning. Fuck, what was it called?
Strike.
Cunning strike or cunning, whatever it is. They can cunning action. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I said it like 10 minutes ago. I couldn't remember. But it gives you. That
means I might need to rework things again though. It's fine.
Yeah, but those like monks and rogues are mobile characters, so they have those abilities to give them that extra mobility and economy.
I just realized this is why you should understand action economy. I took the charger feat, which now is seeming unnecessary and unusable, since it's pretty much a recreation of that combination.
I thought charger was. I thought it was if you use charger to like run into somebody, you get extra.
So
I imagine you flying a kick.
It is a bonus action itself. So you use your bonus action that allows you to take the dash action. No, wait. This is confusing as hell.
Or is it when you take the dash action?
When you use dash, you can use the bonus action. Yeah, okay. I mean, it still has benefits.
To use your bonus action to take a melee. Yeah, so let's say, it would be hard for you to. You couldn't use your bonus action to take dash and then use your bonus action to do another hit.
Right.
But,
so it's not like I could dash in with this hit and then use something like the flurry of blows or anything like that. Yeah. Because I would have already spent the bonus action for the feat.
I just jumped onto a Reddit thread where somebody is working through this same exact problem, charger on a monk. And yeah, they are mutually exclusive. If you use dash with charger, you can't
you can't chain it into anything else.
Yeah. I mean, if you need
you already can. So it's like you would be, like you said, with the dual wielding thing, it would be quadrupling shit pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanted to revamp something, that's fine. If you're like,
I had another one in mind.
Yeah. I mean,
it just gave me an extra reaction.
Yeah.
And then that way I know how to use reactions.
Yeah.
Those I got down, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I still think that there is some use for charger, but
I like the bonuses and stuff, but
yeah. So if you want to keep that, but I would say the actual attacking after dashing as a monk, you can already use a bonus action to take a dash, and then you get a full attack instead of just a I guess it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Whether you take the bonus action to get the dash and then take your full action to attack, or you take your full action to attack and use a bonus action for dash. You get to do both things when you can usually only do one. But I would say if you wanted to revamp, that's good stuff like that. That happens all the time where you're like, hey, actually, I can already do this, or this isn't that useful. Let's do something different.
Yeah, and like I already avoided that too because there were some feats, that give you things that really seem like an opportunity to bring in some features that are cool from other classes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then one thing I did figure out that was part of my confusion is 5th level monks get extra attack.
Yep.
Which had me also confused.
Don't forget that you have that.
That does not take any action, bonus action, or anything. It's just passive.
Yep.
So I was getting that confused with martial arts.
But you don't get, because you get an extra attack, you don't get an extra bonus action with that.
Yep.
Right.
Still only one action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still only
one action that's worth 2.
Yeah.
It's not 2 actions.
2 attacks. Yes.
Right.
And so think of it as
it is extra attack.
Yeah, so I guess I should have talked about this in the action. In the attack, is that 6 seconds is a long time. People are like, well, I can punch a bunch of times in 6 seconds. But really, what you're doing in 6 seconds is you're attacking, and then you're getting back to balance. Because if you think about combat, it's all about keeping your balance and keeping on your feet. So as you get better, you just get better at being able to get back to your neutral stance faster. So that's kind of what you're doing, is that you can attack twice in the same amount of time that it took a normal guy who's kind of unskilled will attack once, and it takes him a little bit to get back in ready, steady on his feet.
Yeah, you could also make the stretch to a skilled fighter is going to be looking for openings and circling and positioning, and that takes a little bit. That 1 or extra 2 seconds could be the chance of an opening or not. So I want to do a capstone on dash so we can continue moving on. Essentially, it's absolutely a mobility tool. You're gonna have to weigh the tactical advantage of giving up an action potentially to move, which could be the circumstance of life and death, or the decision between life and death of that encounter. Or you've got some options for action economy to kind of roll that into getting that extra mobility for free, or for a small resource like key or whatever. And then the next thing we have is disengage, which I think falls into a similar category as dash. You're talking about mobility with a little bit of defense. Disengage lets you move away from an enemy combatant in your space without provoking an opportunity of attack. So that can be a good thing. Depending on how your armor is and what your defenses are, this may or may not be a good choice to do. Like sometimes you can just safely back away with a low risk of getting hurt. But if you're a wizard or something, like disengaging is maybe a little bit better. If you're a rogue, you have the ability to disengage for free. So Bill, do you want to like share your thoughts on disengage and like how you use it and how you might use it in game?
Yeah. So the main thing that disengage does is I think different than some of the other earlier versions of Dungeons and Dragons and the Dungeons and Dragons offshoots like Pathfinder.
Like what?
Is that it's that when you take disengage, everybody who could give you opportunity attack can't anymore. So it's not just one creature. So if you're surrounded and you take a disengage, you can move freely. And let's say you have, it's you, and then there's 5 guys surrounding you, and it just says your movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. And so normally, like, you would have to disengage from like one guy, but the other guy would, or something, like you're disengaging from one person, but
and that's previous versions. Is that what you mean? Okay, gotcha.
That's what I'm like. And so like a lot of times you just see it's like, oh, I can take the one hit, but like if you're surrounded, disengage will avoid all opportunity of attacks from every creature. And you can, you
could dance around them if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You can, it's for the rest of your turn.
Yep.
So you could run down a hallway passing people that weren't engaged with you at all, and they're still not going to get an opportunity of attack, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Sweet.
You do not provide.
It's actually much more powerful than I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's very powerful, but when you're thinking like a one-on-one, you're like, oh, it's not that powerful. But like, yeah, if you're surrounded, you just need to get out of there. Like, especially if you're that wizard, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of guys that are ganging up on you. Take that disengage, and it's very useful, or else you'll die if you try to leave. If there's like three people attacking you, at least 1 or 2 of them are probably going to get hit, get the hit off, and do a lot of damage. So,
and if they're smart, one of those will shove you prone, and then attack you and like cut your movement speed in half, get advantages on your attacks. So like if your DM is ruthless or conniving, they'll do a lot to keep you from doing that. So I think that's really important to highlight, Bill, because that's like you might not know exactly what these enemies can do to you. Cool. So that's disengage. I think another amazing ability that gets overlooked a lot is dodge. Mm-hmm. Dodge is awesome. And even if you're like so let's talk about what dodge does. It imposes disadvantage on all incoming attacks from everybody until your next turn. So that might not seem like, okay, like big deal. But if you're a fighter and you've got 4 guys clumped on you and you just take dodge, you've essentially like nullified probably half of that damage, if not more, by imposing disadvantage. And then you've got this group that, your party can then start, picking apart when they're focused on this one guy. So I love dodge, but I think you can misuse it too if you're not being careful. So do you guys want to chat about dodge a little bit?
Sure. I think, like you said, dodge is extremely powerful. If you are that protection fighter, and then you're giving anybody around you +2 AC, or is it +2 AC? And somebody has disadvantage if they attack you or somebody else besides you. There's a bunch of different little talents and feats you can get that like make you the center of attention. And it's kind of like in World of Warcraft, your tank may not do as much damage. You may just never attack. You may just do dodge and just have everybody around you attack you. You're taking dodge. Yeah, exactly. And I think also like dodge isn't just for dexterous characters. Like if you have a shield, that means you're not attacking. You're focusing on, you're just focusing on defense. And like Chris said, it is extremely powerful if done right.
I wonder. I want to make sure if you're a fighter, level 5 fighter, you've got extra attack. Can you extra attack and dodge every turn?
No. So extra attack is you get an extra attack when you use the attack action. So that's a key language is whenever they say the attack action, that means that you have to you're using your action for
But if
that
you,
attack. Yeah,
right.
you can't split.
But
it's
if you
not that
surge,
you get two,
right.
you don't get two actions. You get two attacks with the one action. If you wanted to do
like an action surge,
exactly.
you could. Yeah, and that's really cool too. If you being able to like dodge as an action surge and then have an extra attack fighter be able to make two attacks, that would work, right? If you have if you're a level 5 fighter with extra attack and you also have action surge, you can action surge to dodge and still use two attacks.
Absolutely. Yes. Basically the dual attack just means that whenever you take the attack action, you just attack twice. It is, it's not two separate attacks. It's not, you can't split them up. And so that's another, rules as written, I don't see how you could attack once and then move 5 feet and then attack again as a fighter. I just, I guess there's arguments to say that you could do it, but
what do you mean?
Yeah, I guess you could do it. It's weird for me when it says like when you attack twice instead of once when you take the attack action.
To like break that up, like, I attack you once, and then I'm gonna walk over here to this guy and attack him once.
Yeah, you can definitely attack two different people, but I mean, and there's no set in rules, and I'm sure you can have hot discussions on Reddit of what the theory is, because it doesn't say it has to be done, but it also doesn't say that you can't. Just when you take the attack action, you're taking that action at where you are.
Right. But it also makes sense. Like if you and I are engaged at melee and Mark's standing over like 10 feet away, I'm not going to like stab you once and then just walk over to Mark and start stabbing him if I haven't like defeated you. Like that doesn't make sense either. Yeah.
And that kind of defeats the purpose of like having that extra attack. Just means that you're a little bit more fluid with your actions, but like having to break that up to actually move 5 feet. That is my stance as DM, and you guys can always rule differently when you're the DM, but for me, you cannot split up the two attacks and an extra attack with...
I think that's a fair reading of it as written.
I think my only caveat would be like, if that blow killed that enemy and you still had the second one to apply to another target, you could move on to the next one. I would roll that.
I would say that, that's good. You should never be penalized for killing an enemy or defeating an enemy.
Except in Final Fantasy 1 for the 8-bit Nintendo, if you overkill an enemy, you lose that attack, and it's frustrating.
For everybody. If you all have everybody attacking that guy, and then the first guy kills him, everybody else just moves forward a little bit and then steps right back because they have no one to attack.
They're so stupid.
Yeah, damn you, Final Fantasy 1.
It was brutal, man.
It was.
Pulled no punches. All right, well, speaking of pulling no punches, I don't know if this is actually a good segue, but the help action is one that I really love because I think D&D 5e is really just, at its core, is about giving advantage and disadvantage. Like, those are your main levers you can pull to kind of pump and debuff your the pieces on the table. So help is just, like, you describe what you're doing to give somebody an alley-oop, and they get advantage. And if they already had disadvantage, then it bumps up to just like a normal roll. You don't ever get double advantage or double disadvantage. But, that could be from making an attack roll to like doing a task, like searching for some clues or whatever. So there's a lot you can do with help. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of geek out on the help action for a little bit.
Help is definitely one that is very useful in combat. And also, like you said, don't forget about it outside of combat. Like, it gives you the advantage on your next ability check. It doesn't have to be combat. So if somebody's doing a perception check, a search, an intimidate, you can help them with the intimidate and just like kind of stand behind them with your arms crossed. Like you just like give fun things. If it's a long jump and it's like the wizard, you could just like give them a push as they jump. You know,
you have to toss me.
Yeah, I can't make it. So like this is a lot of that. Not only does it add fun and flavor to the adventure and like the actions, but it's very useful in that I like everyone was, oh, I'm going to attack guidance, and guidance is like a 1d4, which
Yeah.
is like nice, but help is very like almost like broken to the point of like if you're doing it right, you should always roll things with advantage if somebody's there to help.
And so like
Yeah.
I think it's worth talking about abusing help in a certain sense because you can, and it's like, okay, the DM can make things more difficult. There's some tools they have at their disposal there, but like playing a wizard and arcane trickster, like I leverage find familiar as much as I can to get help because we also play like smaller tables and that help is just, for lack of a better word, helpful. But some circumstances where you could think about applying this, if you're in a combat encounter where like maybe you don't have any magical damage, so you can't hurt a magical immune enemy, is there a way you can help the party now to help them succeed in their efforts? So you can kind of like shift what you're doing to kind of lend more success outcomes to your group. And that can still move the tide of battle forward instead of, essentially doing nothing. So finding ways you can help if there's nothing else that you can do is a great way to spend your economy for your turn.
Yeah, for sure. It keeps you from, when you don't really have anything else to do or anything to add, you don't have a magical attack, or you're in discussions with somebody and you're not a charismatic speaker or anything like that. You can always find a way to, okay, I'm going to aid this person with this, or, it gives you options to be useful when you otherwise would not. And it can make things more fun instead of you just sitting off to the side, because it tells you like, okay, you're not that good at this, but how are you aiding? Like it also has that storytelling of, it makes you part of the story, even though you aren't really participating that much. You're not the lead.
Yeah. An important thing to remember too is that you're still in touch with your party in combat. You can't, do a soliloquy or, like launch into a whole backstory suddenly because you only have 6 seconds on your turn. But sometimes I feel like, especially in a long drawn out combat, you might just get a little, stuck. Like, I don't know, like our strategy, we came in here, we thought we were going to rush in. It's not working. We need to retreat. I don't know what to do. They've got resistance to what I'm bringing to the table, maybe. So don't forget to be like, what help do you need? How can we do this together before you, roll into giving advantages? Like you can find out what the party needs from you.
Oh, so like kind of like having discussion, like what can I do to be, have some of those things
Yeah, because if you're unsure of how to, contribute to the situation, and help is available to you, but sometimes it's hard to even be like, well, what do I do if he's resistant to my magic? And maybe a martial player needs help shoving them prone to get advantage or something, and you could help with that. But you might not know if you don't take the chance to just ask, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I think the only other thing like I have to add to this is just as a DM ruling help, I always ask, describe it. What are you doing? Like, don't just say I help, because that sucks and it's boring. But like I'm going to give it to you. Just give me something, like make something up. And then as a player, on the other side of it, I always try to find like, okay, what's a feasible way that my character could lend some assistance?
Yeah. Like it's hard to help you swing your great axe. You know what I mean? Like you gotta kind of find a good way to play it that doesn't break immersion.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta be like, right when he's attacking, I turn to the goblin. I was like, here your sister's going out with Squeak, which is a basketball reference. If everybody loves basketball as much as I do, which you should.
God. It's yes. Oh, I haven't seen that movie in forever.
Yeah, no one has.
Squeak Little Bit Scolari. I mean, I'll never forget it.
I saw it once when it came out at Blockbuster.
Wasn't Squeak the same guy who played Chota Boy in Orgasm?
Yes, he was, absolutely. I think he's like their legitimate friend because he's not an actor.
He has to be, yeah.
He is. Yeah, he played Chota Boy.
Oh my God.
With his cock rocket. Cock rocket?
Cock rocket! Okay, back to D&D. and readying an action is our next one. We've talked about this quite a bit already.
Wait,
hide.
we skipped hide.
Did we? Oh, I scrolled too far.
Alphabetical order.
Yep,
Yeah.
sorry. Hide action. Yeah, you hide from stuff. It requires you to roll a check. You roll a stealth check. And then if you're in combat, people are going to, or creatures are going to have to roll perception checks to determine whether or not they find you. What other factors go into hide when you're in combat? Like rogues have some special ways that give them not like more economy to hide, so they can use their cunning action to do that. But if you're not a rogue and you're trying to do this stuff, it's a little different.
Is difficult because just because you can take the hide action doesn't mean that you can take the hide action. You need to have something to hide behind or hide in, or something that would block your vision or distract the observer about your presence. And so if you are just fighting in a big empty room, there's nowhere that you could take the hide action. Like it's not possible. Even though you technically have the ability to take it, it's just going to always fail. I'm not going to stop you from taking. Like, what are you hiding from? It's like, I'm hiding in behind, just out of view. Like, no, it's just not going to happen.
Ignore me.
Yeah, ignore me. So that's the key that I would do is if you want to do the hide action, like think realistically, like where is your character going? Like, what do you want the monster to, like, if there's just one tree and that's it, and you're going to take the hide action, like, why would he not think that you're there still? Like, just because you're out of sight, are you going to take the hide action and then just stay behind the tree? Like, what would make you think all of a sudden this guy doesn't know where you are? Because he knew where you are at one point. So that's like, you got to be cognizant of like, what am I trying to accomplish here, and what do I want the enemies to think? That I'd run away, that I am still here, or that I had moved but I am still here? Like,
yes,
yeah.
And also, there's a difference between hide and taking cover.
Correct.
Mechanically,
yeah.
Yep.
But in story, they feel very much the same. Like, I'm going to run behind the tree. And in my head, in the heat of battle, I'm like, I'm going to take the hide action, get behind that tree. When really what you probably want to do is take cover.
Mm-hmm. That's a good distinction to make, because the covers could be just as beneficial in that situation as hiding would. And I also think, Billy, what you said, like, there might be opportunities you can't hide. And that's just the way it is. Like, this is not Skyrim, all right? You can't just, or World of Warcraft, you can't just invisible... Oh, what was that?
Yeah.
Just the wind. Okay, that's not...
Batman smoke bomb.
Yeah, just doesn't...
Yeah.
So if your DM rules that you can't hide because you're in broad daylight in a field, you got to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do it. Unless you come up with some really compelling storytelling and role play, then maybe. But even then, Billy's shaking his head no.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to get across in that. And when you're fighting somebody, they're on heightened alert also. So it's not like you would have normally been able to hide there if they didn't know you were there. But once they know you're there, it's, it is like everything else. Where they're you have the yellow glowing eyeball. Like, they are looking for you actively. And so you need to really convince me if you're going to take the hide action. Like, I know that rogues can take it, and then they get the, like, I want to do it because I want to do my bonus damage. I'm like, okay, well, how does that, like, just keep popping from behind the tree? Like, they know you're there. Like, that's not hiding. Like, what are you trying to do? And so, yeah, I think this one is very easily, because mechanically it's cool and it gives a lot of benefits, that people just kind of like gloss over, like, the realism of, are you actually hiding from anyone?
Yeah. And it's like, if you're in the middle of a fight with somebody, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to just hide from them and then come out and attack them when they're not expecting it. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
You know.
That might work for some, like, low intelligent beasts or something. Like, if you're fighting a swarm of cockroaches.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Something with not like
anything with any sort of battle sense, I feel like, or that's even been in a fight once. Like, if you get just socked at a bar one time, every time in the future, you're going to have a little bit more awareness
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very easy to overlook as a DM because you've got so much going on and you have to like have all these internal motivations for even something like a pack of wolves
Yeah.
to keep track of.
Right. Like what's
But that's a really good note because again, like immersion breaking, which we're all, kind of want to keep things in game as much as possible.
Yeah. In general, if the rest of your party is maintaining combat with this creature, it's going to be hard for you to find anywhere to do the hide unless you're really far away and like you're a ranger or archer and you're 50 feet away. You could probably do it, but in general, I kind of get this as like if you come across a monster and you're gonna die and you are running and he's chasing you, you could take the hide action to try to because that's most likely when you hide from enemies is when they're pursuing you and you don't want to fight them, not in the middle of the battle. It's not smoke bomb or anything like that, unless you can blind them, or something like that. Where there's ways that you could do this to make it easier. Like if you had some sort of smoke bomb or something like that, you could probably I actually have this smoke bomb. Bam! Now I can hide, and you're like,
it seems more intended for like your party is sprung upon, and maybe you're the rogue who rolled a low initiative, so it's like beginning of combat as everyone's piling in. Personally, as a DM, I would be like, this seems like the time to hide, but mid combat it doesn't really make as much sense to me.
But once they know you're there, like they could, like at the beginning of combat, they could have not the best idea of how many combatants there are on each side, and so that's when you're going to have people that could just really quickly like glance out behind that tree, like, maybe they haven't seen me yet. I haven't gone yet, so maybe they'll forget I'm here or didn't really pay attention to me. Once you do that first attack, they know you're there.
So maybe like, especially as a DM, we can kind of focus on how liberal you are with the hiding ability. But as we move through this list, the next one is the ready action, which we have discussed quite a bit. And essentially that's you're holding your action, you're readying it for a certain trigger that you have to describe. Whether that's like enemy comes through the door, through the window, or some kind of circumstance. Once that trigger trips, then your action goes off and then you resolve it like normal. This includes like tacking, casting a spell. Dodging is probably not the best use for it because you'd be better served taking the dodge action immediately. But those are some things that you could do for your ready action. Is there anything else you want to kind of add to that, to ready actions? Because I think they are very useful when used properly. Like setting traps.
I think in general, I think if you set it up properly and the movement is interruptible, it interrupts the attack. So if somebody's moving through a door and you say, as soon as he moves through the door, I'm going to attack, you get your attack off before he does. Like you interrupted, it's still his turn, but you interrupted it. But like if something is not interruptible, like as soon as he swings at me, I'm going to do something. Like you're not, like he's already started swinging at you. That's not interruptible. You're not Rurouni Kenshin. You're not going to, slash at him real quick, while he's taking the 30 seconds to bring the axe down at you. You have to very clearly state what the triggering attack is, and if it never happens, you lose that action. So
that's the risk.
It's not like hold turn. Like hold turn, you can just, but that doesn't interrupt anything. Like, okay, I want to hold turn, and if you hold turn, you can just say at the end of somebody's turn, like, okay, I want to go now, and then you're permanently in that new, at least the way that I've always played, in that initiative order. Like you've held your turn, you're now permanently behind them in initiative order, which sometimes works if you want to go after the fighter. Always just hold your turn, but it won't interrupt anything. You're just going, like you just change the turn order. But it just be prepared that if something doesn't trigger it, and it has to be very specific, you could, if you cast a spell, that spell is lost. You've lost that spell slot.
Yeah, because you have to ready the spell. That's the other thing to like when you're readying an action, you're readying the spell, and like that's really critical to know.
Yeah, and you have concentrate, even if it's not a concentration spell. At that time, you have concentration. So if you get damaged before that, you could lose concentration of that spell. So it's it's very useful, and it can definitely change the tide of battle. But you have to be very specific, like with the triggering action, and it can't just be vague. Like as soon as this, something happens, like what?
As soon as he flinches.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be as soon as he comes here, as soon as he does an attack, as soon as he attacks somebody, or like as soon as he gets within range is usually a really common one. Like you're readying this spell, they're coming from, it's only a 30-foot range, he's 40 feet away. As soon as he gets within 30 feet, you're going to cast it, and that does interrupt it because, as soon as he gets there, you're doing it. But let's say he just stays out at 35 feet, you've wasted it.
The trick is that it happens immediately after the trigger. So if you say I'm going to wait until he casts, then you're happening after he casts. If you say I'm going to wait until he comes to range, 35, because that's where he's going to cast.
Yes,
that seems like an important distinction.
Yes,
then you're getting one off before him, or you're letting him hit you, and then you're responding with your reaction, right?
Yes, it interrupts his turn, but it doesn't interrupt actions that are already in progress. If something is already in progress, it won't, and it can't be stopped. It won't stop it. Like I said, like if he's casting that spell, he's going to get that spell off. If you say as soon as he casts a spell, I'm going to cast it. He's going to cast first.
One thing I just noticed too that I don't think I'd paid attention to before in Ready is that it specifically mentions your choices is you can make an action in response to that action or move up to your movement speed in response to that action.
Yeah.
Which seems interesting because you could, I feel like that's super beneficial actually if you're trying to say stay out of someone's spellcasting range, perhaps. Like if they move towards me, I step away kind of thing. Just like
yeah, you can't do both. It is not
right.
That's the difference between that and like holding your whole turn, is that if you say as soon as he goes within range, I'm gonna move up to him and I'm gonna swing. It's one or the other. So in general, what you'd be doing is like when you say I'm gonna move, you just be readying the dash action in essence. Is that as soon as he gets within range, I'm gonna use my dash action and deuce out of there. But yeah, you can't hold on to those like movements. Like, I'm going to move 20 feet here, and then I'm going to ready an action, and I still have my 10 feet. Like, no, that's not how that works. You have to do your full movement on your turn. In essence, readied actions don't occur on your turn. You're interrupting somebody else's turn, so it can only do that single action. But it is a single action. So if you are a warrior, you can do both your attacks.
Oh, that's cool.
And you because you are preparing that action. I've never had it where if you can do an action and then that action triggers a bonus action. I don't see why not, as long as it's part of that action. But the reaction is your bonus action, so you wouldn't be able to do that. Actually,
that makes sense. Yeah,
that's where it gets tricky, especially for this monk I'm going to be playing.
Well,
there's so many.
I need to remember that.
There's again like rules is written unless it's the exception, and unless there's an exception to that, a caveat to that exception. There's so many just like and
smaller. Then in the moment you end up just being like, we'll do it this way. We'll look it up later.
That's cool.
That's how it works. I rule of fun. If it's more fun that way, that's the way it is. And if we change, if later on we realize it was wrong, and we change it from there, no big deal. That's just how things work. But yeah, you can always get like, if you're like, okay, I want to do this, but also this, like, can you link things that with your ready action? I think that's a GM's call on how complicated, and like if it essence is 2 steps, or if it's one thing it's done as a part of an action. Like, if you want to attack and use your key to attack harder, that's well within range. But doing something like, I want to something separate, I think it's a DM's decision.
Yeah. All right, well, we're almost through this list of main actions before we get into the other actions of D&D. So let's keep plugging away. You can also search. So this is the same search you would use normally in game. You're searching, you're using your perception or investigation abilities to reveal hidden characters. You're looking for clues, or basically any other helpful information of your choosing that you're describing. I'm looking for this, and then like the other actions that you can take in combat, it's completely situational, but depending on how it's used, it really could give you the bit of information that you need to progress the battle forward. Some examples of like your party's attacking, but like you've been attacking for a few rounds and not really making a dent. Can I do a perception check to see like what our attacks are actually doing? Oh, you can see like maybe he's got some magic. Maybe through that you learn he's got some kind of resistance or magical, I like to address some of those like puzzle elements by like, okay, you got this information. Now you can kind of move the battle forward a little bit. Whereas it's not just, just trading blows. So do you guys want to jump in on searching in combat and kind of explore that a little bit?
Sure. So when we say in combat, we mean within like initiative,
Yes.
which doesn't have to be combat. Anytime that seconds matter, I like to switch to initiative, because it keeps people from just willy-nillying all about where time doesn't really matter. So for this, a big one is that you fall into like a trap and the room's filling up with sand or water. That's an initiative that it's going to fill up so much every turn. What are you going to do in that time? And then you're trying to search for your way out. That's a prime example of this.
No, I think in that situation too, that'd be one where like maybe you have to be a little more specific with your search, because it's like a lot's happening all at once. And it's like, I'm gonna do a perception search for an exit. Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, where, and what? Like, tell me what you're looking for, or specifically where are you looking? Like one of those two. You can't look for everything everywhere in 6 seconds. It's just not going to happen. Yet, I mean, you could do that normally if you're in a room where time doesn't matter. But yeah, this search, you have to be a lot specific. And when it is combat, not all combat ends with either victory or defeat in combat. So let's say you are trying to escape, or you're trying to do something while the combat's going on. You can always have the search option, or that's when you use some of the other actions that are non-specific that they don't talk in here. We always have a habit of like thinking like, okay, like you have the two things. You have out of combat and everything happens, and that's when the role playing happens. Then once you go into combat, it's turn based, and then all we're trying to do is get out of this combat as much as possible by killing the enemy, and then we go back into the role play. But like I said, I like throwing in initiative order in certain situations when it would matter, and not all combat should be, there should be ways out of combat in certain circumstances that isn't just kill all the other enemy. Like,
and I think if you're the DM and running those encounters or initiatives, being able to kind of pull those and have things that the party can find embedded in those encounters, coming with a plan and allowing for that to happen just gives you more tools. And I don't know, for me, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think it's fun if we can kind of circumvent combat or resolve combat in a different way. Like I don't like playing murder hobo games.
Mm-mm.
So
no.
Like being able to role play our way through stuff and be smart about things, especially with smaller groups, smaller parties, it's rewarding for me.
Yeah. Should be like, it's like that old 70s Kung Fu with the guy who choked himself while coming.
God, David Carradine.
That's the guy. Like where he would just talk about like, I don't want to fight, I don't want to fight, I don't want to fight. And then if he did fight, he would kick some ass. But like, that's kind of the thing that like, you should always strive to, for a normal party that isn't just murder hobos, you should strive to do things out of combat, because that's human nature. That's how things actually work. Like if your first instance is
punch him,
I'm punch him. Fight. Yeah, I'm punch him. And I like, and I think it's always funny that sometimes I have activities, but like I said, I as soon as seconds matter, I'll roll for initiative. But then when people go into initiative, like their brain gets turned off and they're like, okay. And then the first thing, what do? Oh, I run up and I attack him. I'm like, he didn't attack
You're
you
conditioned.
first.
Yeah.
I just like, okay, like, oh, you go down an alleyway. There's some strangers that you don't recognize. Roll for initiative, and the first thing is you attack them. I'm like, I never said that they were bad. I'm just saying that now we may need to interact a little bit. Everybody's a little bit tense.
As soon as you hear the battle music, come on, it's just
you're
like,
just like, oh, kill everything and everyone. Like if you're a GM, that's my my best tip for you is randomly for things that aren't combat, tell them roll for initiative, because it does bring up that like, oh shit, like your heart starts pumping, and it could just be really, really simple. Like have negotiations that are based in initiative, because it makes things more exciting. But if you only roll for initiative for combat, then your players are always going to think initiative equals combat.
Yeah,
it's Pavlov's dog. You are training them to think roll for initiative equals fight.
It totally does. I popped a video into chat. All right, so that's search. Also, I think when we don't really do a lot of these in our games, although it came out more in our first game, The Joy of Extra Dimensional Spaces. That's a mouthful. The Joy of Extra Dimensional Spaces. Invisible enemies. There were at least one or two in that adventure, and that's another area where like you don't really think about using perception checks, but that might be a circumstance too. Like invisible enemies might be around, or invisible characters. And using perception checks might at least reveal not that that you can see them, but that they exist, and that you have to be aware that there's an invisible thing. Anything else in search? Cool. Yeah, I don't like invisible things. All right,
no, I think that's another one that's just good to remember that doesn't get used very often. That can be helpful along the lines of help. Yeah,
definitely. You can use anything that you can do outside of combat. You can do in combat. It just may take longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to wait for your DM to be like, your poison evaporates off their armor and has no effect. Like you could search out that information too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's just about the player being more proactive about using those abilities. So the last of the main actions is use an item. And that's drinking a potion, throwing a grappling hook, laying down some cow traps, Batman smoke bomb, all of those things. There's a distinction of like switching weapons, using like a door handle that's not locked. That does not fall into this category. That's like free use, free action. You get one of those. So if you do want to like swap your weapons real quick or swap your shield, that's a little different. But if you're, using an actual item, using a magic wand or something that requires an activation, this is where that would kick in as your action. Is there anything else to add there?
So there's a list of things you can do along with your move action. And so I think that it's nice to be able to do that as a move action. Because they don't really call it move actions in 5e. It's just you have your move.
They call it free action in 5e. Like for those like talking or pulling, like I'm going to pull a potion out of my pack or open this door.
So yeah, back in the day, you had the move action was an action, and in the hierarchy, it was below action, standard action. So you had your standard action and move action, and you could, But now there's not really a move action, but there are things you can do as part of your movement, which is a lot of these things that he's talking about. Simple things you can do, pull out a weapon, things like that. But yeah, if you need to do something a little bit more complex, if you think about how long the turn is, if it's going to take you 6 seconds, then it's going to take your full standard action, like to go into your bag and pull something out, like, unless you're, Geralt of Rivia and you have all your potions on a bandolier.
Not a great place to keep breakable glass vials.
Probably a bad idea. But like, anything that's like sheathed or something, you can get that really quickly. You would assume like your quick stuff that you're going to have, you can pull up really quickly.
You're allowed to tap the floor with a 10-foot pole. Mm-hmm. But only, I think, a 10-foot pole. I think that excludes all other lengths of poles by mentioning.
7-foot poles, you're done. Game over.
Yeah, that's not long enough to detect a trap.
It's an actual example.
Yeah, well, it's because people use it to find traps. because it's like I'm gonna poke that pressure plate over here, and if the ceiling falls on you, 7 feet's not going to be enough to keep you from harm. But 10 is the minimal safety standard for adventurers. Okay, well, actually, since we're on the free action, because use item's pretty straightforward and it blends into this like free action, there's this thing with bonus actions that I think when we first started playing, we sort of fell into that I do want to clear up. Like, a bonus action is not a minor action that you take. Bonus action is directly tied to your class, pretty much always, I think. Like, there's,
in general, yes.
So if it's like, oh, I want to use my bonus action to drink a potion, you can't do that unless you have a specific class that says as a bonus action you can drink potions, and there's not, so you don't have that. So just as a DM, be mindful of how the bonus actions are being used, and as a player we need to like make sure we understand like when bonus actions can be invoked. They can't just be invoked for like minor actions or as like an additional small action.
The word bonus is not good semantically. I think it confuses the issue. If it were like enhanced action, like you have an action and an enhanced action.
Yeah. Like a skilled action, I think is...
Or like action tier 1, action tier 2.
Skilled
That's
action.
That's how I kind of think of it.
Yeah, I think of it skilled, like you have to be trained to do that quickly. So if you are a monk, you're trained to move quickly or get another elbow in when you're attacking. Like it's always something that's class specific or ability specific, feat specific. Like it's something that you're trained in. It's not something that normally anybody can do. Like it is something that you specifically are better at than other people, and then you can do it quicker, which is why you can do it as a bonus action. Like, oh yeah, as a bonus, you also can do this in that same turn. Like, think of it like that. Like, it is not a separate action from your standard action. It is just a bonus thing that you can do because you're really good at it. And the same turn as a standard action. So, it's not some, I'm going to do this. It's not like major minor actions in 4E, but that's what they're called, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of like where I think it came from. Like it spilled into like our early sessions. Yeah, but it's just, I think it's another little thing like for general rule housekeeping and fairness balance is good to keep in mind.
Yep.
And then lastly, we've already broached this, is the free actions. Being able to kind of do those smaller things, taunting an enemy, saying something, opening a door that's not locked, like before changing rooms, changing your weapons. Those are things that you can do one of during your turn. Cool. And then lastly is the reaction, which we've covered, I think also at length, but they're always in response to a trigger. So Mark, you're a monk and you have the ability to catch arrows as a reaction.
Deflect missiles, yes, and slow fall.
Yeah. So like you have some things built in. So like slow fall is never going to kick in unless you are falling and can evoke it. Missile defense is not going to, there's always got to be something. So you can't, choose to spend your reaction like you would like a bonus action, like whenever you want. Yeah. Is there anything else aside from what we've talked about for reactions that we want to add to this? You only get one per your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I believe there's a feat that lets you get 2. For like if you want to do 2 opportunity of attacks. I think I have to double check, but
I wouldn't take
in general, and what I would say is for me, if I'm the DM or my player, one turn for you is not initiative order from highest to lowest. It's from when I act to when I act the next. So you can't take, like, let's say you take a reaction at the bottom of the initiative, and then now it's at the top of the initiative. You don't get another initiative, even because it's a new turn. Yeah, but it's not your new turn. Like a turn starts from when you initiate. It's just like when you do any of the spells that say it takes 1 round.
Right.
Like 1 round is from the start of your action or your turn to the start of your next turn is 1 round or 1 turn for you. So a lot of people get that confused, that they're like, oh, it's a new round, everybody gets fresh reactions. Nope. That's
some accidental metagaming.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't really know what the top of the initiative order is necessarily.
Yeah, that's really important to like that small distinction is crucial.
Yeah, and another key to this is so your initiative. that is how quickly you can move. Do you feel that you should get a reaction before your initiative?
Probably not, because it's like, yeah, I mean,
I agree. I do not like to give unless it's something that's like secondary that you don't realize or it's innate. Like for you, like that slow fall, it's just like a reaction that you just like.
Yeah.
As soon as it happens, you're like, oh shit, I'm falling. But like if you haven't had your first turn yet, you are not engaged. Your initiative hasn't come up. You're not ready yet. You're still caught like Pathfinder calls it like flat-footed. Like you are not. You haven't moved yet. You're caught unawares, and until your turn is up, like most reactions, I as a DM am like, you're not ready yet. Like you can't do that. How are you going to parry something if you haven't even been able? Like you're not ready yet in your fighting stance.
Yeah, because it's almost like a mini surprise.
Yeah,
you don't lose your turn completely, but you really can't do anything until your turn's begun. Yeah, I like that. It's hard for the player. Go ahead.
Yeah. If a combat opens with, say, like a ranger shooting in a surprise round, then deflect missiles is a no-go because no one was expecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say because you're not expecting it. Like if you aren't prepared, you're not like you don't have your stance. You're not in your ranger or your monk stance. You're not prepared to do any combat actions because you've been caught unaware. So like I said, I think that like the slow fall, because that's not something that you would do combat oriented. It's more like a reaction that like you feel that you're falling and or like some like mage spells. Like I could say you could do that, but like anything that is like a combat reaction, if you haven't done your first turn, you're not in combat yet because you are not ready.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on it.
That's how I feel.
I gotta keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not rules is written, but I think that gives like another thing of if you roll low on the initiative, like you like that's bad. It's not just like you're a little a clunky warrior who's a little slow.
Hey, pay attention.
No, you got caught off guard. You're not ready. Everybody else is moving around. You're just like, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah.
That's how I see initiative, not just.
And you know what? We also do rules like flanking and stuff that give other benefits. So I think it's fun to have some tweaks and nuances to make combat a little more. I don't know. I like things that make it more involved, more in depth.
Yes, for sure.
Since we've kind of been talking a lot about combat because it is like turns you can take in combat, let's just close out with some action economy like tips and discussions. So like kind of circling back to the beginning of our discussion, action economy is your character's maximum potential when you're in initiative. So you're looking at like what can your character do in a single action, and then being able to, with all the tools we've just discussed, what combination of those is going to get you safely through the encounter. That's sort of like the way I look at it. But maybe we could share like how do you guys approach your action economy when you're playing in game or when you're managing monsters as a DM?
I don't know if this applies there, but I think that when you're so focused on action economy, you are sometimes hesitant to try out new things that aren't like these are just a list of things that you can do on your turn, but they are absolutely not all encompassing.
And they're they're just the mechanical rules that you
yes.
They're tools, like you said.
Yes. And so like if I was a player, I would, and if you wanted to do something cool, I would ask your GM, and if your GM, don't ever penalize them for trying to be creative or do something that's unique, to be like, well, then you can't use the action economy as like almost like as a reward, that if they do something cool, let them like do other things as well. Like it's like, don't feel that like they're losing out. Well, if I do this, I can't do anything else. Like, no, have them, that's their standard action, but they still maybe could do that. Like if you can link it with a bonus action because you're kind of trained, or no, you want to trip them. You're a monk. You want to trip them, right? Let's try. Oh, I'm going to try to trip this guy. Instead of just trying to do like grapple, I just want to trip him. But
the leg,
I want to also, I want to trip the leg, but I'm going to sweep over and I'm going to knee him when I trip him because I'll use my bonus action to get an unarmed strike in while I'm tripping him. That's awesome. I would totally go for it.
And for that, like that could be a trade-off of like you use your attack roll to make him prone, and then your bonus action, like you would normally a monk, to deliver a strike. Small change, cool action economy, rule of cool, didn't break the game.
Yep.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, and with Flurry of Blows, you don't even need to bend anything too much because you can use an attack to shove, prone, flavor it as a trip or what. Exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking, like sweep the legs, but mechanically, it can be a shove. And then they're on the ground. You can follow up with a quarterstaff with advantage on a prone enemy.
Yeah.
But another fun thing I saw was shove prone and then push people in situations where maybe you have like another martial fighter or a tank
just
or
rolling
something.
Them around
like
on the ground?
Crown control. Sweep the legs and then kick them for an assist from a party member.
Oh, that's awesome.
Billy, slide their body across the floor.
Yeah.
I just imagine like you basically surround this one goblin and you both take turns shoving him to the ground as he gets up.
Yeah, can you imagine like tripping somebody and shoving them straight into like your barbarian who brings a two-handed axe down because they're prone now right at their feet.
I mean, that was 100% my strategy with Bidu, like hit him with a sapping sting so then could just cut his head off.
And I think
off.
That's the really fun thing about action economy is like once you figure out cool things you can do on your own, if you can blend with the party and everybody starts to see the overall, economy of the group.
Yes.
And then having that, obviously is when you get into like boss level fights and stuff. You got to have that kind of figured out. So I'd say, play around with it. Again, talk things out in combat to try things with your party because you're going to need it eventually to know how the other players are, using their stuff and when they need help and when they don't.
Yeah, I think that like you guys both laid out some really awesome, like the action economy is like building blocks, and from the DM's perspective, like figuring out how to link those together for your players. And then from the player, like there's nothing cooler or more satisfying than an awesome combination. Like,
you should never be penalized for doing something cool. Doing something cool should never be like, I want to do this cool thing, but I just, I kind of want to I'm going to stick with this because this is tried and true, like the attack. Like, it is a case that damage is going to do more damage if you're just doing an attack, but like there should be enough rewards and benefits as a GM to thinking outside the box that you're encouraging it and doing it finding it within that action economy rule set where people don't feel like they're giving up their turn to try something, because then they just won't do it the next round, because if they feel like they gave up too much stuff, like I could have attacked twice and done a bonus action instead of doing this trip,
Yeah. And because like if it's going to be 30 minutes before you get a turn again, because combat encounters take so long, that's a big stake. Or like, in the game we played before where if you got paralyzed, okay, just sit back and relax.
Yeah, that sucks so bad.
So when you're looking at an action economy too, it's part of it's just like getting as much fun as you can in a certain round.
Yep.
It's looking at the resources you have available to you. It's looking at your party, your group, your team, and what you can bring together. I think that's like action economy 202 is like them bringing your party into it. That would be an awesome discussion to have later. But I think that pretty much covers like at length what you can do in a turn, how long a turn is. It's apparently about 2 hours worth of discussion in terms of like what you can do within that. But
which is how long combat's going to feel every time.
Every time combat is slow. It always is. Yeah. But so is everything else. Like you don't want to make it feel slow. Yeah, it's going to be slow, but make it exciting slow.
And get as much in as you can.
It is slow, and you know that. So know your action economy so you can have as much fun as possible during your turn.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, that's it for our episode on action economy, also known as how long is a turn in D&D? We hope you got something out of this conversation. Join us next week as we jump back into our live plays or discussions. Jump over to +1togaming.com for our live play tips, character building resources, and DM tips. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.